Hello and welcome back to Copic in the Craft Room. Michelle Houghton here. Last week we worked on an image in my Copic Sketchbook. This one is from Penny Black. It is a fun bike image and we did some no line coloring and we did it in real time so you could see how I was working on that brick and doing that no line coloring. This week I'm going to be doing the rest of the image, and to do that I'm not going to be able to do it all in real time. So I'm speeding it up, and as I pick my colors here, so this is me just testing these out. I have a pretty good guess because I've worked with these colors a long time, but I'm laying them down next to each other on a piece of scratch paper so I can get a feel for what all do I need. I'm thinking through all those pieces of the bicycle before I start coloring. So I'm going to start with a B12, a blue 1-2, and that's going to be the color of the bike. Now, because this is no line coloring, I'm going to do this in segments, especially this bike portion, because it gets complicated where all those pieces overlap. B14 is going to add the shading, so I'm keeping this really simple. Just those two colors, B12 and B14, going back and blending with B12, and then adding that B12 to the front fender. Again, because there's so many parts that kind of cross over each other, I'm really purposefully doing one little section at a time. I'm using those same two colors, so we're back to that B12 again, filling in those next sections, some of the frame of the bike. And most of that I can do all at once, but I'm trying to avoid the small knobs that might be done in a metal. And then trying to just find those pieces. So B14, these are small narrow tubes, but I'm running that B14 down one edge of them to add that dimension and shape. You can see already that the lines even now on the bike are starting to disappear. That sepia ink really does do nice work, especially with a simple image like this. And I don't have to add a lot of color to make those lines disappear. So I've got a lot of the framework colored in, and then I'm doing a little work on that brick, and then I'll go back and forth a little bit with my E04 to clean up edges of the brick that comes up against the bike. So another little piece up at the top that I found that I think really deserves to be that bike color, so B12 and B14 up there. And again, and forgot to do some blending. So coming back with B12, and softening those edges all throughout the frame. And then I've got W3. All of the metal is going to be done in a series of W's, and the tires are as well. So again, I'm kind of picking and choosing what areas to work on. I'm trying to work on areas that don't crisscross over. I've got the kickstand, the tires. I've got these little metal pieces that look like in the chain on the bike, and the gears, the pedal that I could see through that front tire. Coming to the front of the bike, I've got the entire rim and tire that are going to at least all start with that W3. This marker also needs some refilling. We talked about that a little bit last week. There looks like there's a bell up on the bike, and then those pedals all are going to go gray. So W5 is next, and this is a really important step for all these grays because this is going to help me define. Now I'm adding these little teeny tiny dots on the chain to add that texture, and just some little tiny striations on the gears. Then I go right down the edge of the kickstand and out the arm of the pedal, or that piece that runs out to the pedal, and I'm darkening up that pedal and just filling it in with that W5, adding kind of shading along all those tubes and the bell and the little flipper on the bell. Now the tire, I want to make that tire look like a tube that's going around that wheel. So I kind of have to think about, okay, if the light's kind of coming in from that left or left front, how is that going to hit that? Where is it going to catch light? Kind of going along the seam. Because remember, I've got the metal rim on the inner edge, so that's going to stay lighter, but then I've also got the tire that's going to go extremely dark. So I have to clean up those edges and see if I can get that to look that way. So W7 is next. Again, being really cautious as I work my way around the tire here. So the metal's not going to get the W7. That's going to stick with just the tire areas. A little bit on the chain. Again, little teeny tiny dots. It's showing that texture that that chain would have. And I am going to go ahead and add a W9. This is going to really take that tire to that black rubber stage. I don't need to add a lot of it, just a hint along the edge. And then W5 is actually going to come back and do some blending. I don't need all of those colors, but again, I want the tire to look like it's that dark rubber, so I come in and just add it all the way along that left edge as well, smoothing out that back tire. And then W3 is going to soften right down the center of the tire. And then all those other metal areas where I use the W3 and W5, I'm going to go back in and blend. There's a few areas I don't want to blend smooth, and that's on the gears and the chain, because those actually have some texture to them, and I purposely had added that in. So next, let's head up onto those flowers. And that's going to be a V000 that's going to base those. Now, I had slipped last week with my one of my E colors from the brick, and so I ended up with that up on the flowers. V04. Now, I'm doing this little kind of curly Q outline to these flowers to add that texture, kind of a squiggle, but running it right along the edges of the flowers. So I'm not hitting every line specifically, but I'm adding a squiggle that looks like the line that's already there. And as I work this V04 in, that mistake over on that left side is going to start disappearing. I decided that I needed a darker color. So V09 is going in for some extreme contrast. And as soon as I get it in and I try to soften it a little bit, I'm coming back with V000, and I'm truly just scrubbing that area now. I'm not flicking, I'm truly scrubbing it. It doesn't soften enough though. So I tried a V05, but that wasn't going to be dark enough. A V06 is going to go in just with some dotting, stippling, to add a little bit of that mid-tone back in, and then softening the whole thing with V000. G24 is going to go in on the stems of the flowers. I hadn't realized that those were even there until I got to this point of the image. So that was just a quick fix to get those. E21 is going to be the base for my basket. And then I'm going to use E23 to add some shading and some texture. So I'm adding these little tiny striations where the stamp had them. I'm not exactly on each line, but it's showing where those are. And then E25 for even darker shading. E21 to soften up those edges. And then I'm finding other pieces now. So I found the W5 for a little metal piece, and then E23, I'm going to base that seat in, pretending maybe it's like a leather seat. E21 and E23, adding some texture with the E23 on the underside. And then I decided it needs to go darker. So E25 is going to come in and darken up. So it really shows off. Can you see now how the handlebar pops out in front because I've darkened that seat? E21 again for some handlebar, kind of the tape on that handlebar. E23 to show the texture, because it is usually a tape that wraps around a handlebar like that. E21 to soften. E04 to help clean up some of those areas, again on the brick, kind of closing in around that. So there's one last step that I'm going to do, and you're going to see this part done in real time. I felt like I'd lost some details on the metal areas, in particular the rim, the kickstand. So I'm coming back in with my colorless blender and lightening up some of those areas. Now remember, the colorless blender, the great way that someone put this, one of our instructors put this, is that it's like a broom and that it's pushing color. So it's not erasing it. This is not an eraser. I'm pushing color. So I'm pushing it outward, but that's going to clean up some of my edges. It's also going to lighten the area that I put it. And so now I can get those metal rims a little bit brighter than the tire itself. It's just going to give me a little bit better effect on those wheels and some of those metallic areas where I feel like it runs and kind of bleeds into the brick underneath. But I think that'll really help. So as I'm finishing up, I just want to give you a big thank you again for joining me this week at Copic and the Craft Room on YouTube. If you haven't had a chance to, please make sure to like our channel so we can just keep growing our membership. And I can send you a little notice in your inbox that you have a new video each week. Please ask questions and give suggestions in the comment areas. I'm always watching for those and try to answer as quickly as possible. And if you haven't had a chance yet, check us out over at Facebook as well, and Copic and the Craft Room for more Copic inspiration. Thanks for joining me and have a happy, colorful week.